In the first chapter of No One Hears But Him, we meet Soul One, the Watchman. Fred Carlson is a policeman, a watchman in the night. He is tired of the lousy pay, the dangerous work, and mostly the lack of respect, of gratitude, and the lack of responsibility of those he is sworn to protect. The downright derision thrown at him every day. He is full of criticism, condemnation, and judgment, and just wants to give up the day in, day out struggle that feels so futile. But after his meeting with the man who listens, he learns the power of love. He comes to understand that he is not alone in his duties as the watchman in the night.
Fred Carlson had had an excellent lunch with his prospective employers. They had parted from him with expressions of great cordiality, for they respected good and dedicated and intelligent men. His Bachelor of Arts degree, his postgraduate work in government and in applied science, had impressed them favorably, though they were somewhat amused and puzzled about the reasons he had chosen his particular present work in his home city. As they were such smooth and alert and sophisticated men, he had not told them the truth. He had let them believe he had had a period of romanticism in his life, but now it was time to get up and out. They could forgive his romanticism. All young men were romantic, they said indulgently, and he was only 32, though a married man with 2 young children. Some of us even wanted to be soldiers, said one of the gentlemen had said, or railroad engineers in the old style, or firemen. He let Fred imply that Fred, had let it go on a little too long, however, and Fred had colored. He did not like that particular gentleman, and it was he who prevented Fred from telling the truth. He feared to be thought sentimental or a little lacking in ambition, all great crimes and unworthy of a man in his 30s. They had offered to assign someone to drive him about the city until he had to go to the airport, catch his plane, and go home. But Fred liked to walk. He had colored again when they laughed affectionately. "I'll walk everywhere I can," he said. "Just tell me the particular points of interest." "Well, we have a fine museum of science, right in your real line, and a historical museum, right in your line from your studies in government, and an art gallery, which would interest you too. They're all here within 15 minutes' walk of each other. But we'll send someone to your hotel to pick you up for the airport." He had 3 hours. It was a fine autumn day, the sort he liked, winey and smoky and brilliant with sun. He began to walk. It was really a handsome city, though only half the size of his own. The buildings were brighter and of lighter stone and brick, and the city had a southern air, though it was not really in the south. The streets were wider and cleaner, and the people very energetic. Connie would like it. They would live in the suburbs, the one the company particularly advocated for its organization men. He had seen that suburb this morning, briefly. His own city had no such pretty suburbs as this, and so close to all the center of city life. The houses were very attractive and much less than his own house, which he would now immediately put on the market. The school was nearby and had been unusually pleasant and modern, and soon his first child would be going there. In short, everything was fine, including the fact that his income would be twice what he was already earning, not to mention bonuses, stock benefits, expansive vacations with pay, excellent pension arrangements, sick insurance, dependence insurance, allowances for illness, and a dozen other agreeable things not to be thought of in his present work. "I've been a fool," he said to himself as he strolled down the main street and looked at the windows of the shops glittering in the sun. "I'm glad I didn't wait too long." It was too nice outside to think of visiting any points of interest, so he strolled casually along, carrying his coat on his arm, and thinking how enjoyable life would be in this city. The vague depression he was beginning to feel was, of course, only loneliness and a desire to get back home to his family. Besides, he had never been away from home before with an idea of leaving it permanently. He was a gregarious man, he told himself, and soon he'd make many friends among all those congenial men he had met today. Connie, too, would soon find church groups to belong to, and his children would soon be absorbed with new playmates and new activities. And then the winters here were short, unlike those at home, which were hell on a man who had liked to walk. But I won't be walking like that any longer, he thought, though I've not been walking so much these past 3 years or so. It was strange how each city had its individual odor. His own smelled of dust and rubber and steel and electricity. Yes, electricity, and it wasn't his imagination. But this city smelled of pale stone and clean pavements. He knew all about pavements, the penetrating warmth and funny, sort of like fruit. He decided he liked it. The traffic was very brisk, he noticed with an experienced eye, and the people appeared less sullen than in his own city and less belligerent, though there were crowds of them, as every city was crowded in these days. The traffic was less frantic, the pedestrians less rude. All in all, it was easier. He saw a patrolman standing on the corner, alertly watching, and he involuntarily and out of habit went up to him at once. "Hello," he said. "I'm a stranger in town, and—" The policeman was young, but he turned at once, and Fred saw on his face what he always saw on the faces of the police at home: sharp wariness, quick suspicion, all unconscious, but dismally there. He was a little shocked, for he had thought this city unlike his own. He said quickly, "I'm a cop myself. Made sergeant only 3 years ago. Fred Carlson's the name. I'm from—" He held out his hand. The young policeman was still wary, but he took Fred's hand quickly and, as quickly, let it go. "Sergeant?" he repeated. Fred took out his badge and his card and showed it to the policeman as politely as he wished ordinary citizens would so identify themselves. The policeman examined the offered credentials with a thoroughness which had not been necessary 10 years ago, and studied the photograph. Then he handed them back, gave a boyish salute, and smiled. "What are you doing here, Sarge? Looking for a criminal?" "No," Fred hesitated. He said, "Looking for another job. I've got it right here. Police work?" "No. I'm going into private industry with the Clinton Research Associates." The young policeman eyed him curiously, but made no comment. "A man has to think of his future," said Fred. Oh, besides, being a cop these days isn't what it once was. What's your name?" "Jack Sullivan. That's a real cop's name." "No, it isn't what it was, and what I thought it'd be." Jack Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "Some have to be cops," he said. "That's how I figured it. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do." "Same here," said Fred. They looked at each other. Then Jack Sullivan said, "I've got to go along my beat." He began to walk away after the briefest salute, but Fred went after him and strolled along with him. He hadn't liked the expression in the blue and intelligent eyes. "But where does it get you?" he said. "Somebody has to keep law and order," said the young policeman. He glanced sharply at Fred's unhappy face. "That's what some of us were made for. But I guess you, Sergeant, were made for something else." Was I? Fred asked himself. But it was too late to think of that now. He said, "How's crime in this town, Jack?" "Hell," said Jack with eloquent brevity. "It's that way all over the country these days, isn't it? I wonder why. Everybody wonders why." "We lost 4 of our best men last month," said Jack, and his young face darkened. 10 last year. Are people getting to be some kind of nuts? And now everybody's talking of civilian reviews." "That's the time," said Jack with passion, "when we'll go on strike and let the criminals take over for a while and blackjack some sense into the people." "I know what you mean," said Fred, depressed. "Police brutality. All the sweet little criminals howling about it when you've caught them red-handed. Then the social workers and the do-gooders and the kissers and the coors come into it, and the damned old judges who want to be reelected and have soft hearts and soft heads and no sense of public responsibility. We become a nation of psychopathic sentimentalists with no respect for authority and decency and no dignity. Worse, we're a nation of criminals." That's right, said Jack Sullivan with a suddenly wooden face. I guess that's why you're getting out, isn't it, Sarge? So you can forget all about it? He looked fully at Sergeant Fred Carlson, and there was no expression in his eyes. He saw a tall young man, lean and strong and hard, with a fair complexion, light brown eyes and light hair, and an air of resolution and tautness and authority. Jack pursed his lips. I wouldn't say that, said Fred, but I was thinking of the future, Jack. What future is there in police work? Sarge, said the policeman with an elaborate politeness which was like an insult, I wouldn't know. I'm just a dumb cop, or I wouldn't be spending my life trying to uphold something that everybody laughs at. Just a dumb cop. I've got to be on my way. The dismissal was all too evident. Fred Carlson, sergeant, was no longer important. He was only another civilian who didn't understand police work. He was left standing on the sidewalk, watching the straight young back of the policeman moving rapidly away from him. Finally, he turned about and walked slowly on, his head bent. He forced himself to think of the bright new future in this city, the appreciation for all of his work, the doubled salary, the security, and, damn it, the end of fear and the end of feeling of enraged helplessness and bitter hopelessness and the end of contempt. Connie was a patrolman's daughter. Her father had been killed only a year ago on his beat by criminals who, subsequently caught, were released on a technicality. She knew what it meant to be a cop. She was afraid for her husband, though his patrolling days were over, and so he was in less danger. Less danger, but not much. He had had many bad moments since he had been made sergeant, some of them even worse than when he had been only a rookie. He had never told Connie of how close to death he had come only a month ago. It would only frighten her. She lived in fear for him, but she was a policeman's daughter, and to her police work was the most important thing in the world. Like a soldier, she said, guarding the city. Connie was quite poetic sometimes, but there was no poetry to police work, only threat and violence from the lawless, only dirty, grinding work and poor pay, and always the new contempt and derision. That was the worst. Damn, 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 Fred muttered in fury. He came to an intersection with a red light and stopped. A car passed before him. On its bumper was a big red and white sticker. Support your local police. What a laugh. Support your local police, he laughed. A man standing beside him had laughed too. That's a joke, isn't it? He asked Fred. Fred looked at him somberly. Yes, a joke, he replied. The man did not like the look in his eyes. He hurried away. Another solid citizen, commented Sergeant Fred Carlson to himself, a reader of some screaming newspapers that were always howling about police brutality, a man who believed the sons of bitches who were saying in these days that men became policemen only because they were too stupid and too indulgent in anything else, and because they were natural sadists. No wonder such citizens were no longer safe on the streets of their cities. No wonder their children were threatened every hour of every day, and that old shopkeepers were shot behind their wooden counters, and women scurried in the darkness for fear of their lives, and houses were burglarized in broad daylight, and women raped in their suburban or apartment homes. No wonder terror stalked the countryside and the towns, defiant and brazen and red with murder. Chaos was everywhere because the lawless and the psychopaths were no longer what they truly were, criminals. Now they were mentally disturbed cases, or victims of broken homes, or the culturally deprived and disadvantaged and underprivileged. And the people expect every decent, hard-working, brave cop to be a drooling psychiatric social worker and not a guardian of the law and a protector of the public, thought Fred with intense old bitterness. Damn, damn, damn. He felt the familiar despair and frustrated anger again, and the outrage. Slobs, he thought. We've become a nation of slobs. simpering with fake goodwill, and dangerous and dreamy-eyed and soft and lachrymose, mouthing every sick platitude the sly and crafty enemies of society can think up for their ultimate ends. We've become womanish and, what do they call it with their jargon? Scared. Everything is scary now, from a threat of war to a TV show. What kind of people are we? Slobs. Effeminate slobs. Transvestites in more ways than one. He thought of the last time, a month ago, when he had attended the communion breakfast of the Holy Name Society, of which he was a member. He had seen old, grizzled, retired cops there, manly old fellows whom none would ever mistake for old women. They had strong, resolute faces, these men who had guarded the public safety and weal for over 50 years, who had demanded and received respect from the people. They had been the terror of criminals. "Tell me, Tim," Fred had asked one of them during the breakfast, "why is it that people don't respect cops anymore?" "It's the women," said Tim in his rough brogue. "We got afraid of the women and their big mouths and their poking their noses in politics and such. We let them make women of our boys, too. God have mercy on their souls." Fred had asked another old retired policeman the same question. "Well, I tell you, Sarge," the old man answered, "it's the general breakdown in religion and public morals, and who's to blame? Over the past 40 years, I've seen it for myself. I ain't saying things wasn't tough for people in the old days, they was. But people were working too long and too hard to listen to pussyfooters and their soft-headed tripe, and they laid a heavy hand on their kids, too, and dragged them off to church. But now my grandchildren laugh at religion and go their ways. And who did it? I don't know, son, I don't know. I think it's way too many women and things and wanting too much for their kids before they earned it. That makes them weak and whimpering and no muscle in their bodies or their souls." "Well," said Fred with gratitude, "my Connie slams the kids if they get out of line, and she's right. No democracy in our household, and diapers given an equal voice. What do kids know?" "Nothing," said the old man promptly. "But you'd think, listening to the women and the women teachers, that every time a kid opens his full mouth, he was saying Holy Writ instead of, and so the kids think they own the world. I tell you, Fred, one of these days there's going to be a real shaking out, and it can't come too soon." "They call 'em kids when they're old enough and to be married and have families of their own," said another policeman. "On one hand, they tell you that the kids have more maturity these days, and I know more than we did at their age, and on the other hand, they call 'em babies and cry their fool eyes out when some young hussy has a bastard and says she didn't know. Now, what the hell didn't they know, with everything out playing in the newspapers and magazines and advertisements on TV? They just figure someone will bail them out with their own mess instead of throwing them in jail as they used to when they rolled in the hay." Permissiveness, thought Fred. What was it Lenin had written? Debase the morals of a people, and they will have no courage to resist. Well, the morals of the American people have been debased as far as possible now. A faithless and adulterous generation. They were ripe for harsh totalitarianism and the whip. Inevitably, they would get them now. He had been walking very fast and now stopped in the warmth of the autumnal day to wipe his face. He saw that on his left hand there rose a gentle swell of green land in the very midst of the city, with brilliant gold and red trees and clusters here and there, and flower beds filled with bright autumn flowers. At the top of the rise was a single white building, classical, the red roof and bronze doors shining in the sun. It was a beautiful small park, Fred thought, and wonderfully well kept. He saw fountains and marble benches in the shade of the tree, and squirrels romping in the grass, and children playing here and there while their mothers watched them from the cool shadows. A little church up there? A museum? Fred began to walk slowly up one of the gravel paths, his interest excited. The white walls in the distance gleamed in the shining light. He had never seen anything so handsome and so peaceful. He saw a young mother sitting under a great oak, watching her little boy feeding a squirrel. She had a beautiful face and large black eyes and a mass of silken black hair following almost to her shoulders. She smiled at Fred, and he stopped. He touched his hat. "Pardon me," he said. "I'm a stranger in town. What is that building up there?" In a clear and very sweet voice she told him the history of the building and old John Godfrey, and he listened with deep interest. "A man who listens, huh?" he said. "A doctor, a psychiatrist, a social worker, a lawyer?" The girl smiled, and her face became vivid with light. "Oh, no," she said. "That's what some people think, but it isn't so." "Well, who?" The girl was suddenly grave. She studied Fred. "You could find out for yourself," she said. "No one seems to tell anyone else. Did you ever see him?" Her voice was very quiet. "Yes," she hesitated. "You see, 4 years ago, I was pretty desperate. I was going to kill myself." "You?" He was incredulous. "And leave your husband and little boy?" "Well, I didn't have him then, Tom and me. If it hadn't been for that man up there, little Tom wouldn't be here now, and I wouldn't. And what would have happened to my husband, I hate to think. And where'd I'd have been? Well, I hate to think of it now." She studied Fred again, very acutely. "Why don't you go and talk to him yourself, if you have any troubles?" "Well, I haven't any troubles," said the reticent police sergeant. "At least not any I can't manage myself." "How lucky you are," said the girl. Her eyes were very sober. She called to her little boy, and Fred sauntered upward toward the building. How lucky he was! He was leaving the hopeless and heartbreaking rat race of police work and making a future for himself and his family in a job that would be respected by everybody. Yes, he was very lucky to be getting out in time before it was too late. It was only the thought of selling the first home he had ever had that was making him feel depressed, and the idea of leaving familiar places and old friends. Yes, that was all. In a couple of months he would be happy again, or at least contented. For who could be happy in this world? He stopped on the wide, low step to read the arching golden words above the marvelously carved bronze doors. "The man who listens." "Oh, I could tell you a lot, brother," thought Fred with such powerful bitterness that he was astonished. "I certainly could. But would you listen to me? Or would you purr like these neutered gender counselors and soothe me with foolish words and platitudes? Or would you tell me I was doing exactly right when I know damn well I'm not?" He was struck by the treacherous vehemence of his own thoughts. Why, of course he was right. Why had he thought for even a second that he was not? What hidden thing in himself had betrayed him? He was so disturbed that he felt hate for the man within this white sanctuary, the cooing, murmurous liar who probably had no manliness but only that nauseating and emasculated goodwill that was replacing Christian righteousness these days. He probably stroked the cheeks and the arms of the piteous wretches who came to him for advice in their desperate misery and bleated psychiatric jargon and told them that society had mistreated them and that they had his compassion. Compassion, hell, thought Fred Carlson. What people needed these days is real understanding, the kind that told them, as God told Job, to gird up their loins and be men and not scared pseudo-men. "Brother," he thought, staring at the bronze doors, "I'd bet you never heard a real man's complaints in your life. I'd like to tell you." "Not a doctor, a psychiatrist, a social worker, a lawyer," the girl had said. Then he must be a clergyman, one of the glossy new breed, full of sophistication and concern over modern complex problems and our duties to the world, with never a word about a man's stern duties to his God and the imperative to be a man and not a woman in trousers. Fury made Fred Carlson push open the door so strongly that he was almost catapulted into the cool, dim waiting room beyond. He exclaimed, "Excuse me," but there was only an old man there, In the midst of glass tables and pleasant lamps and comfortable chairs, the old man smiled at him. He had a very brown face, webbed with years, and a shock of virile white hair, and his whole appearance and his clothes revealed him as a countryman. "Boy, you sure got troubles," said the old man with a deep smile, "running in like that." Fred's new hat had fallen almost over his nose in his rush. He pushed it back. "No," he said, "I haven't any troubles. I'm a stranger in town." "That's what we all are, son," said the old man. "Strangers in town. Always was, always will be. I remember something I heard once. My wife was a great reader and liked poetry. Strangers meeting in an alien land at the gates of hell. Never thought much of it until lately, but now I know what it means. Yes, sir, I sure do." Fred was so interested by this that he found himself sitting down and taking off his hat. The old man was studying him with tired but very sharp eyes. "You said you ain't got no troubles? Son, if that's so, then you ain't got much sense either, or much feeling. When somebody tells me they're awful happy, I think, you're either a liar or a fool. 'Tain't possible to live in this world and be happy after you're about 3 years old." "And that's why you're here?" said Fred. "Well, that's right. I come to the end of the road, and I don't know what to do. I hear that a man in here can give me some good advice. Nobody else can." "He must be at least 70, thought Fred, "and he's worked hard all his life, as my father and my grandfather did. He worked hard on the land, and from the look of his hands, he's still working on it. He had a lonely look. He was probably a widower, too." "I hope that man will help you," said Fred politely. He heard the chime of a soft bell, and the old man stood up. "That's for me," he said. He paused and stared down acutely at Fred. "Son, you better talk to him yourself. You look as if you need it. I can smell trouble, the same as I can smell snow and rain before they come." He went toward the far door, shaking his head. Fred fumed. He saw the door close behind the old man without a sound. He sat back in his chair. It was pleasant in here and cool, and as good a place as any to rest before going back to the hotel. Fred picked up a current magazine and began to turn the large picture pages. There was a huge colored spread here of a certain famous evangelist with a fervid and excited face, wind-blown hair and upraised hands, addressing a vast outdoor audience. Under the picture, which is double-fold, there was a caption, "Watchman, what of the night?" Fred's restless hand stopped. He stared at the printed words, which seemed to leap at him. Watchman, what of the night? From the Bible, of course. He remembered that vaguely from long ago. In the ancient days, the watchman patrolled the walls of the city and the gates with his lantern at midnight and his sword at his side and his alarm trumpet. Under a great golden moon or under dim stars, he pursued his slow and resolute way, guarding the city while it slept, his eyes seeking enemies and criminals and murderers and thieves. That was his duty, his sacred duty. Without the watchman, the city would fall. Fred hurled the magazine vindictively across the room. In his great rage, returned. Oh, he'd mention that to the soothing and sanctimonious liar in there. He'd ask him what he thought of a nation that attacked its watchmen and jeered at them and accused them of police brutality. What do you think of a city, he'd say, that despises its watchmen so much that it won't pay them a living wage and fulminates against them and catcalls them derisively? Why, I'd say, well, I'm leaving my post, and I just hope to hell the vandals will murder you in their sweaty beds and burn your houses down around your ears. That's all you deserve. Take your measly handful of dollars and stick it. Let your civilian review boards patrol your city and kiss every murdering son of a bitch they find in the dark. We cops have had it." He sat and brooded in his rage and indignation. Then he heard the chiming of the bell. He looked up. That call was for him. He jumped to his feet and went to the farther door, his mind boiling with furious questions and furious answers. He flung open the door and charged inside, full of hate and bitterness. He did not know what he expected, but certainly not this blue and white calm, this windowless peace, that distant blue-shrouded alcove and the white chair with its blue cushions. He had half thought to see a serious, middle-aged clergyman at a desk with files of cases behind him, a pad and a pen before him. He had expected a rich greeting. "Good afternoon. Won't you sit down and tell me what is troubling you?" Fred was surprised, and the heat of his mind calmed a little. There was no one here but himself. Had the man left after the last visitor? Fred looked about him, seeing softly lighted walls and hearing the faintest whisper of fresh air conditioning. There was a scent of fern in the air, like the fragrance of a deep forest. "Anyone here?" he asked tentatively. No one answered him. He put his coat over the chair and laid his hat on the floor. Then he sat down and stared at the blue velvet draperies. It was very strange, but they seemed to hide someone who was very much at hand and who was listening. Fred leaned forward a little and said with abruptness, "I'm a cop." There was no answer. Fred laughed a little. A retiring cop. I'm getting out. Do I need to tell you why? It's very simple. I'm tired of being ashamed of my job, of having to apologize for it to a bunch of fools who think cops are stupid or sadists and love to shoot and to club for the sheer hell of it. Well, they've driven me out of their own ranks. And when I see a cop on the street after today, I'll think, you poor, unappreciated slob. One of these days, some punk is going to shove a knife into your ribs or blow your brains out, and then your wife can leave your kids and get a job for herself. Well, there won't be enough money to let her stay at home. There won't be any justice for you either, or any public tears. The judges will fall on the neck of your murderer and sob about his broken home and how he was deprived, and your murderer will be sent to a nice, cozy jail for a couple of years or to a country club sort of psychiatric hospital, and everyone will be sure that he was abused. You were using police brutality, weren't you? Sure you were. You were protecting your city and your life. You slob. Watchman, what of the night? What? Fred exclaimed. Oh, that stupid question. I'll tell you, when the night comes, it sure as hell is coming. All the cities will be chaotic with murderers and looters, and that is all they deserve. Talk of alarms. I'll be glad to see it, I'll tell you. I'll be glad to see it. I'll be the first to laugh at the shock and frightened faces. Women and kids murdered in the streets, stores looted, churches burned, men scurrying along the walls like mice and whimpering. Who cares? His voice, almost violent, rang back from the walls like challenging echoes. You don't think so, huh? You think men are getting more and more civilized, do you? The perfectibility of man? You know what I think. I don't give a damn if you are a clergyman. You might as well hear a few brutal words from a brutal cop, probably for the first time in your life. The only way the majority of men can be kept in line is by fear of the law or by fear of God. He stopped. The fear of God, he repeated slowly. And where is that now in America today, or anywhere else in the world? And what have some of you clergymen done to put the fear of God into people? Nothing. You deplore what you call force, whether it be the authority of parents, the law, or divine justice. You believe in persuasion and education and enlightenment. So did other men in the past, and they found out, as we'll find out, that they are only words, and maudlin ones at that. Let me tell you of a few things I've seen for myself in my own city. There isn't a day but what some cop doesn't bring in a punk caught stealing or manhandling or killing. And then, when the punk is brought to trial, the social workers swarm in and the crying parents, and it turns out that the cop was wrong and the punk was only abused and never had a chance in life. The judge listens. Does he turn to the parents of the punk and say, It is you who should be punished or executed, for you did this to your son and to your country, and you are the real criminals. No, he doesn't say that. He wipes away a tear himself, and he sharply questions the cop, and half the time he doesn't believe the slob who had risked his life to defend the law and society. Sometimes he even reprimands him, and the punk goes free and ends up committing another theft or another murder. Then people ask, where are our police? All they are doing is handing out traffic tickets. I'll tell you where the cops are. They are patrolling their beats by day and patrolling them by night, and they know it is useless. The people won't back them up. In fact, the people are their enemies. The watchman, Fuzz, the pigs as they call him, is desperately serving the very men and women who are busy destroying his authority and condemning him and releasing murderers and thieves on themselves again, all in the name of brotherly love, for God's sakes. They don't understand any longer that millions of people are natural born Cains and must be cast out, as the Bible calls it, and ostracized from society and not rehabilitated until they show repentance. And I've been a cop for years, and I never saw a criminal repent. The only thing a criminal fears is stern justice. The fear of God. It's been replaced nowadays by what they call love. You must love every punk and every scoundrel you encounter. They'll ask you, making big eyes, am I my brother's keeper? They don't know or have forgotten that it was the murderer, Cain, who asked that question. And when Cain asked it, God didn't say, sure, you are your brother's keeper. He only said, your brother's blood cries up from the ground against you. And for that, Cain was marked and exiled and became the father of all the criminals who ever lived in the world since that time. But now we don't mark them and exile them. We give them love. And they come back again and again into the same courts and are hugged by the same social workers, and they prance out to do the same job over and over again. I've noticed, every other cop has noticed it too, that the majority of the crimes are committed by released criminals over and over again. We can look at a job and almost always we can name the man who did it and bring him in again, and we are faced with all kinds of hampering restrictions handed down by the courts. Confessions are rarely accepted by judges any longer. They believe that all confessions are forced and false and were extracted under police brutality. Even when the criminal looks the judge in the face and tells him the truth, the judge beams down at him compassionately. And it's hard to get a decent, self-respecting jury nowadays to bring in the right verdict. They've all been corrupted by this godless love you hear and read about everywhere. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. That's right, said Fred. Then he halted. Had he heard that from the man behind the curtain? Or had he only been thinking it? A faint confusion fell over his mind. It was this silent place where the man's thoughts seemed to be external to him and not internal. Anyway, it's right, he said, whether I heard you say it or only thought I did. Do you know something? All this love you hear about these days is unclean. That's what it is, unclean. You look at the people mouthing it and you get the sensation of moral and spiritual uncleanliness, unnatural, indecent, like the love between homosexuals and other perverts. It may be called love, but I don't call it that. I don't call all this pervasive love in the national atmosphere real love either. It's repulsive. It's disgusting. It's unmanly. It's dangerous. Have pity on the unfortunate, yes, the truly unfortunate, like the sick and diseased and crippled or handicapped, the old and those who are truly victims of their wonderful fellowmen. But not on the criminals, the misfits, the perverted and habitual thieves. No, not on them. These real enemies of society. They chose to be what they are. I was raised in the slums myself. My father was a laborer. I don't remember eating well the greater part of my childhood. But I sure as hell was afraid of the old man. He was the boss of the family. He sent us to school and to mass, and God help us if we failed in either school or in catechism. He taught us to be clean, mentally and physically, even if we were crowded four to a dark little bedroom, one step out of a line, and we smarted for it for days. None of us became criminals, though we were what they now call disadvantaged. My brother's a lawyer. My two sisters married good, God-fearing men, and we sent ourselves to school and to college, working on vacations and at night and on weekends to finance ourselves. No one paid for us, and we're proud of it. But next door to us lived another family of 6 people. The husband and father worked with my dad, but what a difference. The kids raced the streets. They were expelled over and over. They were delinquents before they were in their teens. They never went to church. They ended up thieves. One is a murderer, and one is a convicted child molester. Their father never beat the hell out of them and never disciplined them. He talked to my dad about loving your kids, but if ever a man hated his children, he did. How do I know? The police records show it. The man let them do as they wanted and gave them as much as he could and asked nothing in return, and never even mentioned to them what it means to be a good citizen and a good American. They had no duty except to gratify themselves at the expense of society. If that isn't hate, I'd like to know what is. One of them killed a cop, and he tried to kill me. Fred shuddered as he remembered that night only a month ago. He said, "We got an alarm at a jewelry shop that was being looted. This was one of a series. I went out with 4 of my men. We cornered the 3 thieves, but not before one of them shot at us, killed one of my best kids, and almost got me. They'll be coming to trial soon. The soft-headed judge has already appointed one of the city's big lawyers for them. If they get 5 years each, even the murderer, I'll be surprised. For the murder has already been said that his confession was extracted under police brutality, and we caught him with the gun still smoking in his hand. I know that lawyer. He boasts he always gets his clients off. He'll do it this time, too. Social workers are already busy. They've made full dossiers about the criminals, all about how they were culturally deprived and disadvantaged, and all the other measly words, the unclean words. He struck the arm of his chair with a fist. And when these criminals commit the same crimes again, people will write to the newspapers and ask, where are our police? The man behind the curtain did not speak. Fred said, all my life I wanted to be a cop. My father had great respect for the police, and he taught us that respect too. He said he'd always wanted to be a policeman himself. To him, there wasn't a better occupation than being a guardian of the city and the city's peace and safety. Why, it was the most important thing in the world to him, and it was to me. I'd walk with the young and the old cops on the beat and talk to them by the hour. They were proud to be policemen then. People admired and respected them. A mother had only to say, I'll tell Mr. Maloney on you the next time I see him, and the kid behaved. The cop was lawful authority next to God himself and must be obeyed and honored. The priests told us that too. But nobody tells us that now. The kids jeer at the police and taunt them and dance just out of reach. They're the pigs. They're the contemptible members of society. So I know it's useless. I'm getting out. I'm leaving police work. I want to live a little before the inevitable fall of my country. I'm getting out. Watchman, what of the night? Fred nodded grimly. Yes, what of it? And all the watchmen will be killed or disgraced or disarmed. I don't want to be one of them. Don't tell me, as the chief did last week, that the local police are the only defense the people have, not only against criminals, but against tyrants themselves. I, I know he's right, but I'm sick of derision and contempt. I'm sick of the miserable pay for risking my life in trying to uphold law and order against all the stupid will of the people who prefer chaos and tyranny. Let 'em have it, I say. In the meantime, I want to live a little myself, respected and reasonably secure against being murdered. What of the night? Well, what of it? It's coming. Of that we can be damn sure. And I'm leaving the walls and the gates of the city, my lonely lantern and my weapons and my trumpet. Let some other poor slob take them if he wants to, and get killed in the doing of his duty. He suddenly saw the face of the young patrolman, Jack Sullivan, and the peculiar look in his eyes. Me, I'm only a dumb cop. And then he walked away. A dumb cop, muttered Fred Carlson. A watchman in the night. He looked at the curtain again. Where shall we go to be safe? He asked. Soon there won't be any safety in the world for anyone. Watchman. Don't call me that, he shouted with anger. I'm finished with it, I tell you. I'm not your watchman anymore. He jumped to his feet and confronted the silent curtain with crushing rage. You can't say anything, can you? You're one of them, aren't you? Whimpering over all the criminals and thieves and misfits and pouring love on them. What do you care about the decent people, the little kids, the helpless women, the hard-working citizens? Tell me, what do you care? He saw the button beside the curtain and he struck it with his fist, cursing under his breath. The curtains silently parted, and in the light they revealed, he saw the man who had listened so silently to him. Oh, my God, he muttered, and fell back. He sat down and pressed his hands to his eyes. He felt the light that surrounded the man. He felt his silent rebuke and heard his questions. It seemed that he sat for a long time in the chair, his eyes hidden, with a thin trembling running along his nerves. At last he dropped his hands, and he and the man regarded each other in the intense quiet. I know what you're really saying, said the policeman. You are reminding me that you never left the walls and the gates of the city and never will. You won't deliver the people up to their tyrants and their murderers and leave them hopeless. You'll patrol all the time with your light, and you won't sleep. You'll sound the alarm. You're always sounding the alarm, aren't you? I suppose it doesn't matter that in these days the people laugh at you too and make fun of your fellow watchmen in the night. You know that the night's rushing in on us, just as I do. Somebody has got to be around to guard the people. Somebody. I suppose you mean that's me, too. He shook his head. I'm remembering something. When it was a choice between you and a criminal, the people chose the criminal. They always do. It never fails. But you didn't hold that against them. You've been watching all through the night, and you'll be on hand when the night comes. Fred Carlson stood up and approached the man slowly. He knelt before him and blessed himself and bowed his head. Watchman, he said, you're not to be alone. I'm going to be right there with you, patrolling the walls and the gates of the city.